So, at the beginning of this story, we see a man named Brian who is trying to find someone. We actually learn that the person he was trying to find had tried to kill his wife and daughter. And behind this whole incident, there's a terrible conspiracy, which we'll find out about a little later. But then, when the killer attacks his wife and child, Brian comes and kills the killer too. However, he then learns that this guy wasn't the real mastermind behind his wife's murder. So, he starts checking the body thoroughly. And finally, he finds a cell phone in his pocket, which belonged to the real mastermind. Now, to find his wife's killer, he only had one clue: that guy's cell phone. But Brian gets into even bigger trouble when the police start looking for him for the murder of his wife and child. Anyway, he then somehow gets information about a drug dealer named Mosha through the phone. So he goes to interrogate that drug dealer about the killer. But as soon as he arrives, Mosha's men jump him. However, they had no idea that the person they were messing with was a famous Thai boxer. So, Brian starts beating up all of Mosha's men one by one. And at one point, after taking everyone else down, he starts beating Mosha too. Brian actually thought Mosha was the boss of the killer who murdered his wife and child. So, he tries to kill him. But then Mosha apologizes to him, saying, "Actually, my boss just ordered me to do this killing.
I've never even seen your family.
I don't even know you." But Brian felt that Mosha might be lying, playing a trick to save his life. So, when he doesn't believe him and goes to hit him, he sees the Wyana Company logo on a box there. And after seeing this logo, he clearly understands that Mosha's boss might be the owner of the Wyana Company, who acted as the mastermind behind the killing of his wife and daughter. So, he now tells Mosha, "If you want to save your life, tell me about Wyana. Give me information about where I can find Wyana." Mosha then gets extremely scared and gives him a car's address. And he says, "This car drops off and picks up Wahana's daughter at school. That's all I can tell you." And after hearing this, he leaves Mosha and quickly goes to find that car. So, the next morning, Brian arrives in front of the school. And here, he sees that one of Wahana's special men always stayed with Wahana's daughter, Tina, like a bodyguard. So, he becomes a little cautious. And when Wahana's daughter, Tina, comes out after school, after seeing her face and her clothes, we clearly understand that she's in a terrible mood today. And maybe she even got into a fight with someone inside. But when she comes here and sees that her father, Wyana, hasn't come to pick her up again today, her anger increases even more. And as soon as Brian gets an opportunity, he cleverly hides a tracker in Tina's bag, so he can get an idea of her location and listen to the conversations around her. Afterward, when Tina arrives at her house, we learn that Wyana actually had a logistics business. Besides that, he had a lot of influence in the government. Here we also see his assistant Molly. When Tina arrives here, Molly first handles her. But we see that Tina comes back from school and sits at the dining table in her dirty clothes, which Wyana absolutely dislikes. He tells his daughter, "I enrolled you in the #1 school in the country. Is this all they teach you in school?" And because of this, a fight starts between the father and daughter. Here, Wyana tells her, "You often get into fights at school. Your teacher keeps calling me to complain. Your teacher complained to me again today. When will you ever get it right? Do I send you to school to do all these things?" And that's when we learn that Tina is actually a very practical girl. She never starts a fight with anyone first. But if someone tries to pick a fight with her, she never lets them off the hook. That's why Tina sometimes gets into fights with bullies at school. And Tina gives them a good beating. And that's why her teacher calls her father every day to complain about her. But here, Tina feels that her father doesn't love her at all. So, she tells her father to his face, "I miss my mom. You're nothing like her. You just waste your time working. The daughter you're doing all this for, you don't even notice her." And when a fight starts between the father and daughter over this, Wyana finally makes a decision. He will spend the entire next day with his daughter, no matter what. Anyway, after this, Wyana receives news that the police found some boxes of drugs on one of his ships. After hearing this, he is completely shocked, because he has no connection with these drug boxes. He doesn't do these kinds of things. So, he thinks that maybe one of his company's employees was trying to export these drugs to different places without his knowledge. And the box of drugs the police found might be his. However, when Brian also hears all these things through that device, he doesn't want to believe them at all. He thought that the drug box belonged to Wyana. But now that he's in front of the police, maybe he's putting on an act as if he knows nothing about the drugs. Although Wahana's bodyguard, Sam, tells him to stay calm. And he says that he will find that person somehow. But Wahana still couldn't calm down, because the news of these drug packages getting out was causing a lot of damage to his company. And then on the other side, we see Lucas and Maxie, who had come to Mosha. We actually learned that Lucas works for Kenzie, the biggest drug mafia boss. And Maxie is a member of their group, who is an expert fighter. They came here because Brian beat up Mosha and reported the drugs found there to the police. And because of this news, their boss has now suffered a huge loss. So, we see Lucas go crazy about the drugs, because a stranger came here and reported the drugs to the police. That's why Maxie kills Mosha and all his men. However, to save his life, before dying, Mosha had told Maxie that a man named Brian had attacked here. And after hearing this, Lucas thinks that maybe that man named Brian works for Wahana, and Wahana deliberately did this to harm them. So, he starts planning against Wahana, because he knew very well that Wahana was not involved in the drug business at all. Afterward, the next day, Wahana takes his daughter, Tina, to see his wife's memorial. Although Wahana was going there with great difficulty, making time to make his daughter happy, his daughter was not happy at all. And then he receives news that the box of drugs the police found at Mosha's place yesterday was part of the same boxes that were found in his company's warehouse 3 years ago. After hearing this, he is completely shocked, because now everything has directly come back to his company. Then, when he starts driving towards the city with his daughter, Brian, sitting far away, starts tracking his car. He had actually planted a bomb in his car. But just before he was about to detonate this bomb, Lucas's men attack Wahana's car. And when Wahana's bodyguard sees this, he starts confronting them. But Lucas's men kidnap Wahana and take him away from there. However, we see that his bodyguard, Sam, also follows that truck and finally gets into the truck, where he has to confront Maxie. But we see that he couldn't stand a chance against Maxie. So, Maxie beats him up and throws him out of the truck. And on the other hand, the rest of Lucas's men were now trying to kidnap Tina. But Brian arrives there at the right time. Because he had put a tracker in Tina's bag, he easily knew about this attack. And he comes here, beats them all up, and somehow saves Tina. However, Tina also couldn't understand at all who this stranger was who was trying to help her. But then, when Brian was trying to escape with Tina and a car, Lucas's thugs were following them in Wahana's car. So, Brian uses his remote control to cause a huge blast in that car, because that was the car in which he had already planted a bomb. Meanwhile, as soon as the news of the drug packages gets out, the public starts protesting, because they couldn't accept this in any way. So, the government decides to take strict action. But then we see that the drug mafia boss named Kenzie directly kidnaps the home minister and his family, and kills all of them there. And then his men bring Wahana here too. And as soon as Wahana sees Kenzie, he clearly understands that Kenzie is actually the person who is supplying various drugs using his company's label. Now, Kenzie tells him that he wants 50% share of his company, because he wanted to use his company to send those drugs to different countries. Because since Wahana has good influence in the government, he was sure that if sent through Wahana's company, the police would not check his drugs. So, he could easily cross the country. However, we see that Wahana was not willing to accept these things at all. But even after hearing this, Kenzie doesn't do anything to him. He calmly tries to make him understand. The biggest reason behind this was that he couldn't kill Wahana even if he wanted to. Because if he kills Wahana, he won't be able to use his company. So, he tells him, "All right, fine. Now I will kidnap your daughter, Tina. And after that, maybe you will agree to give me 50% share." Meanwhile, we see Brian brings Tina to his house. And here, through the news, Tina learns that Brian is the person the police are looking for in connection with the murder of his wife and daughter. But now, after hearing this, Brian tells Tina the whole truth. He says, "I didn't commit those murders. Rather, your father did, who is a drug supplier." However, after hearing this, Tina didn't want to believe any of it, because Tina knew that no matter how bad her father was, he could never do heinous acts like drug supplying or murder. But Brian also clearly tells her, "My enmity is only with your father. I don't want to take revenge on you. You should leave here quickly." So, Tina also quickly leaves there and calls her father's assistant, Molly, through a public phone booth and tells her everything. And Molly tells her, "All right, come to the main road. I'll be there to pick you up very soon." But then Tina sees a police car on the main road. So she tries to ask the police for help. But actually, there were no police officers in that car. It was one of the drug dealer's men who had killed the real police officer. And when Tina realizes this, she tries to escape. But that thug catches Tina and holds her at gunpoint. And he tells her, "Now you're worth more than $1 million. So you have to stay with me." But then Brian comes back here again. And he kills that thug and saves Tina's life once more. That's why Tina asks him, "How do you know that I was attacked or where I am?" Then Brian tells her, "Because I was tracking you with a tracking device. And through that, I could hear your location and conversations." Anyway, after this, Tina tells him, "We should find my father somehow, because you want revenge on my father, and I want answers for my father." Then she tells him, "My mother died because of drugs. That's why my father completely hates drugs. He would never get involved in such a business. Besides, we can only find the answer to whether my father killed your family when we reach the real mastermind." And then on the other side, we see Sam comes to that police officer's car. But here, he sees that someone had already killed that person. And then Molly calls him. And when he says that he hasn't found Tina, they start suspecting each other, because they thought that someone among them must be involved with the kidnapper. Then, the next morning, when Brian and Tina were in the car, Tina tells him, "I overheard my father and his secretary talking that 3 years ago, a man used to work at my father's warehouse. And he used to supply various drugs using my father's company label, without his knowledge. But when all these things were exposed, the police arrested that man and took him to jail. But he escaped from jail a few days ago and has started supplying drugs again. So now I think that he must be behind my father's kidnapping." Then Brian asks her, "Do you know anyone who would recognize that man?" Then Tina says, "Yes, the security guard of that warehouse would definitely recognize that man. So we should go and talk to him." After this, Tina goes alone to talk to the security guard of that warehouse. But the security guard becomes suspicious of Tina, or he was working for Wahana's enemies. So, when he tries to attack Tina, Brian comes here and knocks him unconscious. And then they both learn through the computer database that the man's name was Beidel, who still has a connection with the security guard, meaning they still talk. That's why when he asks the security guard about him, they get information about him. He actually used to supply drugs in a slum market. Then, when they come out from there, we see that Brian would often remember his daughter after seeing Tina. Then, when they arrive at the slum market, Tina tells him, "I want to go alone and meet that man to get information about my father, because if you go with me, they might get suspicious." Although Brian was not agreeing to this at all, because he didn't want to put Tina's life at risk in any way. But since Tina was a very brave girl, after seeing her courage, he gives her permission. After this, Tina takes that tracking device with her and goes straight to meet Beidel. And here, meeting Beidel, she tells him, "If you give me information about my father, I will give you $2 million. However, after hearing this, Beidel gets a little angry and tells her, "Your father has been kidnapped by Kenzie, and for just $2 million, I cannot become his enemy in any way." So, he doesn't help Tina at all. Instead, he clicks her picture and sends it directly to Lucas. And after seeing this picture, Lucas quickly calls Maxie and tells him to go and kidnap Tina. So, Beidel tells Tina that he will now send her to Kenzie. In return, he will get a lot of money. However, after hearing this, Tina throws the drug packages at the thugs and tries to escape from there. But by then, Beidel catches her, and he gets extremely angry and attacks her. And during this fight, that tracking device falls from Tina's body, so the signal goes away from Brian. And when Brian sees that the signal is gone on his phone, he clearly understands that Tina's life is in danger. So, without wasting any time, he takes a motorcycle and directly attacks them. But by then, Beidel had held a knife to Tina's throat and was threatening to kill her. But Tina also uses her school experience, bites Beidel's hand, and somehow frees herself. And after that, Brian goes and gives Beidel a good beating, and advises Tina, saying, "Next time, just biting his hand won't be enough. You have to kick hard between his legs." That will be more effective. And here, they learn from Beidel that a hotel owner named Ronnie is the only one who knows Kenzie's address. No one else can tell them Kenzie's address except him. That's why they have to go there now. So now Brian puts Tina on the back of his bike and tries to escape from among the thugs. But then Maxie's men come here and attack them. And at one point, Maxie comes and starts beating them. And we see that Brian was severely injured in this fight. But still, when he gets an opportunity, he throws Maxie down from the second floor and knocks him unconscious there. However, after this, when they were trying to escape, some thugs catch Tina and try to kill her. But then her bodyguard, Sam, comes and tries to save her and tells her to come to him quickly. But now, given how complicated the situation has become, she couldn't even trust Sam. So, Tina doesn't go to Sam and escapes from there with Brian. And after seeing this, Sam is also completely shocked. However, after this, we see that Brian's condition had become very bad, and he was seriously injured. So, Tina decides to help him. She takes him to a nearby animal doctor. And when this doctor sees him so badly injured, he directly refuses to treat him. But then Tina holds him at gunpoint and finally forces him to treat Brian. And here, Tina also asks him about that hotel, because the owner of that hotel can give them Kenzie's address. And in this way, they also find out the address of that hotel. And very soon, they also arrive at that hotel. And here, Tina takes a room by telling the receptionist that Brian is her father and he is very badly injured. However, when they go to the room, the receptionist directly calls Ronnie and informs him of everything. Now, due to being very badly injured, Brian falls asleep. But Tina, instead of sleeping, was watching videos of Brian's daughter on his phone. And after seeing this, she also becomes very emotional. But then we see that the man named Ronnie comes here with his gang. And before they could attack Brian, Brian attacks them. And he alone beats up 25 people and finally goes to confront Ronnie. Although Ronnie was a good fighter like him. But in the end, Brian gives him a good beating, tortures him a lot, and finally gets Kenzie's address from him. However, after this, when they were about to leave to go to Kenzie's address, Maxie comes in front of them again. And this time, when Brian sees Maxie, he is completely shocked, because he thought Maxie had died. Actually, Maxie's anger had also increased a lot because this was the first time he had lost to Brian.
So, he jumps on Brian.
But this time too, Brian starts giving him a good beating. But when Maxie was about to kill Brian, Sam comes from behind and shoots him dead. And at this point, Brian also passes out. And when he regains consciousness, as soon as he sees Sam in front of him, he jumps on him to kill him. But at the very last moment, Tina comes and calms them both down. And she says, "Sam is our guy, he's working for us." And then Sam tells him, "I was also saving Tina. And now that I've saved her, my next target is to save my boss, Wyanna." And then we learn that they are all now in Sam's house, whose address no one knows yet. And then Tina tells Brian, "Since you are very badly injured, now Sam and I will go to Kenzie and rescue my father from there." However, after hearing this, Brian gets very angry, and he tells her, "You cannot do this in any way, because if you go there, your life could be at risk. You could even die." But then Tina tells him, "When you needed me, you used me. And now when I'm going to save my father, you're worried about my life. Isn't that selfish?" However, even after hearing all this, Brian gets very angry, but he couldn't say anything to her, because he had mentally given her the place of his daughter. But still, Brian tells her, "No, I won't let you go alone. I will also go there with you, because I want to meet your father and settle my scores." However, after hearing this, Sam asks him, "What scores are you talking about?" Then Tina tells him everything. However, after hearing this, Sam is also completely shocked and tells Brian, "You must be crazy, because my boss would never do such a thing. He cannot kill your family." But then Brian tells Sam, "Actually, my wife worked as a logistics manager in Wahana's company for 8 years. But when she got some illegal information about this company, she got scared and quit her job at the company. However, because of this, Wahana's company people were very angry with her. And at one point, a man was also sent to kill her. Since my wife had a lot of evidence of Wahana's company's illegal activities, that man was sent to kill my wife and get all the information from her. Although my wife had given all the information and asked them to leave us alone, she said that we would leave the city. But the killer was given clear instructions to kill my wife by any means necessary. So even after getting the evidence, he shot and killed my wife. And in a fit of rage, I went and killed that man. But when that man shot at me to kill me, that bullet accidentally hit my daughter, which is why my daughter also died there. And that's why I've been looking for Wyanna ever since. Because I want to take revenge for their deaths by any means. After this, Brian shows Sam a pen drive and says, "This contains all the information about Wahana's misdeeds, for which he will rot in jail for the rest of his life. And I will do this no matter what." Saying this, as he sets off towards Kenzie's address to catch him, Sam attacks him from behind and knocks him unconscious. But then we see that the girl named Molly comes here with some men. After seeing all this, Sam is completely shocked, because no one else knew the address of this place except him. And then he clearly understands that his cell phone was being tracked, and this address was found through that phone. And when Tina sees Molly, Tina explains everything to Molly. She says, "Someone is supplying drugs using my father's company. And maybe that person kidnapped my father and sent a killer to murder Brian's wife and daughter. Now we have to find that mastermind by any means." And when Tina hears all these things, her suspicion directly falls on Sam. She thought that Sam might have done these things. But then we see that the thugs who came with Molly directly hold them at gunpoint. After that, those men take Tina and Molly away from there. But one man stays behind to kill Sam. But before dying, Sam asks him, "Before I die, I want to know the name of the person who is doing such a big betrayal to the company." However, we see that the man was not saying anything. And when he was about to shoot and kill him, Brian regains consciousness. And he attacks that man and finishes him off right there. Meanwhile, Kenzie tries to make Wyanna understand once again. He says, "Give me 50% share, and work with me to supply drugs. Using your power, we will supply so many drugs, through which we can become owners of millions of dollars." But Wyanna was not agreeing to this work at all. Instead, he tells him, "People like you have offered me various things to buy me before, but I have never done these things. I might die, but I will never do these things." And after hearing this, Kenzie gets very angry. So he brings Wahana's daughter, Tina, in front of Wyanna. And after seeing this, Wyanna gets very scared. And finally, blackmailing Wyanna, Kenzie also gets Wahana's signature on a paper. We see that the man named Lucas was also there then. And he explains to Kenzie, "Actually, my men have informed me that a man named Brian has information about all the illegal activities of Wahana's company. If he goes to the police station with them, Wyanna will be sent to jail, and we won't be able to use his power, even if we want to. So, all our hard work will go in vain." However, after hearing this, when Kenzie asks him, "So, what should we do now?" then Lucas advises him, "We should kill all of them and get that pen drive by any means necessary, and then run the business our way." However, after hearing this, Kenzie starts making fun of him. He even calls him a fool. And after hearing this, Lucas gets so angry that he kills Kenzie right there. And after that, he goes and sits on his chair and directly starts waiting for Brian so that when Brian comes, he can kill Brian and get the pen drive from him. And a little later, we see Brian and Sam come here in a car and attack. And killing all of Lucas's men one by one, they come inside and try to attack Lucas. But here, he sees that Lucas had already made all the plans. He had already held Tina and Wyanna captive at gunpoint. And here, Lucas gives Brian a gun and says, "You came here to kill Wyanna, right? Then shoot and kill Wyanna. After that, I will release Tina. But in return, just give me that pen drive, which contains all the corruption information of Wahana's company." However, Brian doesn't listen to anything he says and instead gives him an offer. He says, "All right, fine, you release both of them. In return, I will let you go." Saying this, he attacks them. And Lucas's men also attack him. So, after Brian finishes off Lucas's men one by one, he goes and tries to hit Lucas. But then we learn that Lucas is also a Thai boxing champion. So, a terrible fight starts between them. However, Lucas knew very well that if he could make Brian very angry, then maybe in anger, he would forget his moves. because that's what usually happens in boxing. So, he tells Brian something that makes Brian very angry. He tells him, "You will be completely shocked to know that I was the one who sent thugs to kill your wife, because she was becoming an obstacle in my drug business." After hearing this, Brian gets very angry and tries to attack Lucas like a madman. But Lucas takes advantage of this and directly attacks Brian, leaving him half dead. Then, when he was about to kill him, Sam comes with a gun and starts firing at him. But Lucas somehow saves himself from there. Later, he uses his moves to beat Sam unconscious too. But then Brian gets up and attacks Lucas again. Because of this, a terrible fight starts between the two of them again, where both of them get seriously injured. However, when Lucas gets an opportunity, he captures Tina and tries to escape from there. But after seeing this, Brian signals Tina. That's why Tina clearly understands the matter. She first bites his hand and then kicks him hard between his legs, which injures him a lot. And, taking advantage of this opportunity, Brian attacks him with his dangerous moves. In the first attack, he breaks his head. In the next attack, he finishes him off for good. Anyway, after this, Wyanna thanks Brian for saving Tina. And Tina also tells him, "It's truly a matter of luck to have a husband and father like you, because you're not caring about your own life to take revenge for their deaths." However, Brian knew very well that his revenge was not yet complete, because he had learned that Wyanna did not kill his wife. Rather, someone else killed his wife. So now he has to find out who that person is. And Tina also understood that no matter how bad her father was, he wasn't so bad that he could kill people. So, she leaves from there with her father. And Brian also comes to the place where the mastermind of this game was sitting. Alright, before going to the climax of this movie, let me ask you a question. Can you guess who the real killer was? If you can guess, then comment first. Later, we are going to the climax part. Anyway, now we see Brian comes to Sam's safe house, where he had already tied Molly up. Actually, we learned that he already knew Molly was the mastermind, but still he went there first to save Tina, because he didn't want Wyanna to lose his daughter the way he lost his own. So he first went and saved Tina. And now he has come to finish Molly off. Here, Brian tells her, "You spun a very intricate web, but you forgot that sometimes a spider gets caught in its own web." And then he tells her, "You are the employee who used Wahana's company to deal drugs. And you advised Kenzie to take a share of his company. And through this, you could easily supply drugs using Wahana's sticker, because Wyanna has political power. And on the other hand, you were planning to sweet-talk Wyanna, marry him, and take over his entire company. But you made a big mistake. You went to kidnap Tina, but I found Tina." And after hearing all this, Molly also confesses to all the crimes. She says, "I knew very well that Tina is a very smart girl. She would never listen to me. That's why I had planned to kidnap her and kill her. Besides, Lucas and I had already planned. We would kill Kenzie at some point, because Lucas also wanted to take over Kenzie's business. And in this way, my planning was progressing very smoothly. But your wife came in the middle of my master plan. She found out everything about my illegal business. Although I tried to buy her off, I couldn't buy her off in any way. Although I knew you were leaving the city, since she had evidence against me, I didn't want to take any risks. That's why I had her killed through Lucas's men." However, after hearing this, Brian tells her, actually, Wyanna had already written all his property in his daughter Tina's name a long time ago. Even if you had married him, you couldn't have taken over his company. Saying this, he places a lantern on a gas cylinder here and leaves. And on the other hand, we see Wyanna hears all these things through a microphone. It is clearly understood that Molly was the mastermind who betrayed him. And then, on this side, we see that when that lantern falls straight down, it falls into the water instead of on the gas cylinder. Meaning, he didn't kill Molly, but he gave her the biggest punishment, which is making her feel guilty. And since all these recordings also went to the police quickly came and arrested Molly. And she was sentenced to 30 years. In this way, Brian takes revenge for his family's deaths. And, at such an interesting point, this entire movie ends here.